Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Distant Pathways, Cape Muslims of South Africa. In 1990, the international community welcomed the release from 27 years of captivity of Nelson Mandela, 1918 to 2013, the figurehead of the struggle against apartheid, racial segregation in South Africa. The father of the nation, as he became affectionately known, became its first black president and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He had spent 18 years of his political imprisonment on Robben Island in Cape Town's Table Bay at the southernmost tip of Africa. In 1792, almost 200 years before, another influential political prisoner, the exiled Indonesian religious leader Imam Abdullah ibn Qadi Abdus Salam, 1712 to 1807, was released from Robben Island after 12 years of incarceration by the Dutch, who then ruled the Cape. From the island of Ternate in the eastern Indonesian archipelago, Ibn Abdullah was a learned Muslim scholar and a leader in the resistance against the Dutch colonial authorities. After being captured and before being shipped to the Cape in 1770, the Dutch removed from his possession all religious texts to restrict his ability to propagate Islam. However, Imam Abdullah was a Hafiz who had committed the whole Quran to memory, and during his imprisonment wrote several copies of the Holy Book from memory, as well as a manual on Islamic worship for local Muslims, Marifa al-Islam al-Iman, knowledge of Islam and of the faith. After his release, he remained in Cape Town, where he became known as Tuan Guru, master teacher, for his dedication to Islamic education and conversion. In 1793, he established South Africa's first madrasa and its first mosque, Al-Wal Mosque, in 1798. In 1497, the Portuguese seafarer Vasco da Gama was the first European to round the Cape of Good Hope, thus opening a new chapter in global history as European powers gained maritime access to the rich lands bordering the Indian Ocean and East Asia beyond. It was, however, not until 1652 that Europeans settled there, when the Dutch East India Company established a small refreshment station for its vessels sailing between the Netherlands and Asia. The Dutch then controlled parts of India and Ceylon and much of the East Indies, as the Indonesian archipelago was known to Europeans at that time. In 1658, the first sizable group of Muslims was brought to work at the Cape as freemen from the Moluccan island of Ambon. Although prohibited from public worship on the pain of death, the Muslim Mahdikas, like other believers throughout the VOC's territories, were permitted to do so privately, it being decreed that no one shall trouble the Ambonese about their religion or annoy them as long as they do not practice in public or venture to propagate it amongst Christians and heathens. Although the Mahdikas were free, from its early days the viability of European settlement at the Cape depended on forced slave or convict labour. The VOC brought its slaves mainly from East Africa, Madagascar, and South and Southeast Asia, regions with a high concentration of Muslims in their populations. The 17th and early 18th centuries was a time of intense struggle for the control of territory in the East Indies between the Dutch colonialists and the rulers of powerful local states, many of whom were recent and fervent converts to Islam. Many indigenous Muslims undertook the Hajj pilgrimage, some spending lengthy periods of study in Mecca and Medina and other Muslim centers. In the East Indies, as elsewhere in Islam, this was an area of widespread engagement in tasawwuf, Sufism, as a higher dimension of Islamic devotion. Learned sheikhs who had received formal authority, Al-Taj, to guide others from recognized spiritual mentors, Malay, Ustaz, in the Middle East, played leading community roles on their return. As trusted advisors of local Muslim rulers, they often had substantial temporal as well as spiritual influence and were frequently in the forefront of struggles against the Dutch. The VOC found a solution to threats to their authority by deporting commoners to their Cape colony as convicts or slaves, or in the case of those with superior authority amongst the local populations, as religious and political exiles. Most prominent among the exiles was Sheikh Yusuf Al-Taj Al-Kalwati Al-Makasari, 1626 to 1699, one of Indonesia's most revered historical figures. Born in Makassar, the capital of the newly Islamicized Sultanate of Jawa in South Sulawesi, eastern Indonesia, Sheikh Yusuf spent years studying in Mecca and the teaching circles of the Middle East, joining the Naqshbandi and Kalwati tarikats, being initiated into the latter in Damascus by its founder, Ayyub al-Kalwati, 1586 to 1661. This was a period when heterodox local Sufi doctrines in the archipelago were being replaced by more normative forms of Sunni Islam, as articulated in the writings of Abdul Hamid al-Ghazali, around 1058 to 1111, to whose ideas Sheikh Yusuf subscribed. On his return to the East Indies, Sheikh Yusuf became an influential religious teacher and writer and a key supporter of Sultan Ageng of Banten, 1631 to 1695, Java, in his armed opposition to the Dutch. He was captured in 1683 and exiled first to Ceylon and then in 1694 to the Cape Colony with a retinue of family members, imams, friends and servants. To isolate these influential Muslims from the slave population, they were housed in Zandvliet, some distance from Cape Town. Nevertheless, the little settlement became a refuge for fugitive slaves and the nucleus of the Muslim community in South Africa. After the Sheikh's demise in 1699 and his initial burial in a tomb overlooking the settlement of Makassar, as it became known, his remains were repatriated to South Sulawesi. Although his tomb at the Cape is empty, it is revered as a holy place or kramat, one of more than 25 tombs of revered exile sheikhs and other exemplary Muslims who are considered by local Muslim tradition to protect the entire Cape Peninsula in a holy chain. The periodical transfer to the Cape of religious exiles from South and Southeast Asia who had absorbed deep levels of education in the heartlands of Islam played a remarkable role in maintaining the character of the South African Muslim community in harmony with orthodox beliefs, which were prominently Sunni, and of the Shafi school of religious law. In the late 18th century, there was a relaxing of attitudes on the part of Cape authorities towards Islamic worships, first among the Dutch and then by the British, who in 1795 took control of the Cape. By the 1770s, Muslims were regularly holding open-air services just beyond the urban limits. The community grew rapidly, mainly through conversions of slaves or former slaves. After the first British governor allowed Tuan Guru to establish a madrasa and mosque, another large mosque, Palm Tree, was built in 1807, followed in 1834 by 5 smaller ones and 2 more madrasas, the largest with an enrollment of 491 students, children and adults. By that time, Muslims were a third of the total population. Muslims welcome all with kindness. Converts found a new life in Islam. If slavery was social death, conversion was both social and spiritual resurrection. A person who converted to Islam became, in the words of a local Christian missionary, a real, not a nominal member of an extensive society. It is not in the mosque alone that he feels himself a social being. In every house inhabited by a Muslim, he finds a home and a brother. From this basis, the Muslim community in South Africa continued to grow. From the late 19th century onwards, it was severely impacted by segregationist government policies. However, its strong faith enabled it to determinedly sustain its essential character, and it played a significant role in the struggle against apartheid, constructively partnering with other oppressed confessional and ethnic groups. Today, some 900,000 South Africans are Muslims, 2% of the total population, of whom some 160,000 live in Cape Town. There are more than 500 mosques, 408 educational institutes and colleges, Muslim private schools, centres of religious instruction, and colleges of Islamic sciences. Muslims occupy many key posts in government service. In a challenging national and economic environment, halal tourism is playing an exemplary part and is a focus of private sector and government developmental strategies. On the eve of the country's first democratic elections, Muslims in Cape Town turned out in their thousands to celebrate 300 years of Islam in South Africa. The high point of the National Day of celebration was a mass encampment around Sheikh Yusuf's tomb as the father of Islam in South Africa. In an address to Oxford University's Centre of Islamic Studies the same year, President Mandela reflected on the historical and potential relationships of Islam with other religious confessions in Africa. He said, "When the Prophet Muhammad sent his oppressed followers to the African Christian King Negus of Abyssinia for safety, and they received his protection, was that not an example of tolerance and cooperation to be emulated today? Is that not a profound pointer to the role that religion can play and the spiritual leadership it can provide in bringing about social renewal on our continent today and in the world?"